don't know. This may be one of the lies that she said, that she admitted to later on, but I just don't see Joe Jackson being violent towards his girls. Hello there, love bugs. Hello there, Bellas. If you are not already a part of this book club, please hit the Patreon link below and or the join button here on the YouTube. And for a small monthly fee of $5, you babies, yes, you can be privy to all the shenanigans before the YouTube gets it, if the YouTube gets it. Now, let's talk about LaToya Jackson. Bye. LaToya Jackson. Joe, they really do have talent. My father reconsidered and thrust the instrument into Tito's hands. Okay, he commanded. Show me what you can do. Tito, tears streaming down his cheeks, tentatively finger-picked a melody, and Joseph's hard expression softened. His wife was right. To my father's credit, he saw how serious they were and outfitted them with brand new instruments, a guitar for Tito, a bass guitar for Jermaine, also the lead singer, maracas for Jackie, and amplifiers and microphones. Marlon and Michael sang and danced. What began as a hobby quickly turned into work. My father demanded absolute perfection, rarely praising, constantly criticizing, and often hitting. Mother cried, "It's not worth it, Joe. Just forget it. The boys don't have to be singers." I don't know why, especially black men, think that the way to make their children hard is to beat them. When for real, all you're doing is creating monsters. That might be why Randy Jackson jumped through Tina Turner's bedroom window, because 8-year-old Marlon had a hard time learning the choreography. He suffered many beatings. Marlon refused to quit though and practiced constantly. Today, of course, he's a brilliant dancer. Yeah, I'd like to get some of that Marlon. When she wrote that Joseph was really brutal to Jackie, I believe that was his way of setting the bar for the rest of the children. If I beat you into perfection, even though Joe's not perfect, but he wants to beat his son into perfection, because after all, after him, Jackie is the man of the house. If something was to happen to him, he wants to know that Jackie is going to follow the same strategy and rules as him. I truly believe that Jackie had the same potential as Michael to become a star in his own right. But endless psychological and physical battering wore him down. As if my brothers didn't suffer enough at their father's hands, he forced them to don boxing gloves and fight one another while he watched. "Okay, Jackie," he'd sneer. "Let's see what you and Tito can do." I believe that some people will believe that this is barbaric, okay? But baby, that's how you get them ready for them streets. To me, boys are different. Boys are able to fight each other, wrestle each other, clothesline each other, chop each other in the neck.
I can't breathe. Let's go to the store later.
Girls, on the other hand, we don't like that shit. Don't put your hands on me. I don't like that, because if you black my eye, I'm going to be mad. Boys brush that stuff off. In those days, our father was clearly the boss. Mother almost never intervened, but shook her head and lamented. That Joseph, he's so crazy. You could see in her eyes that she pitied us for fearing our father so. But it would be years before I understood how unusual her attitude was. What makes Mother's resigned acceptance of Joseph's brutality more confusing is that she grew up in a loving home. Certainly, she knew her husband was wrong. For whatever reason, she never stopped him and rarely voiced any strong disagreement. Instead, she tried to make up for his meanness by bending the household rules in his absence. We had no choice but to obey Joseph's demand of respect. Still, it was very hard for any of us to truly love him. All children need to feel worthy and loved. But our father shattered our self-confidence and self-esteem by the time we were old enough for school. Not surprisingly, none of us ever mustered the courage, the foolhardiness to defend ourselves against him, except Michael. Mother used to say that from the time he was born, Michael was different, quick to walk and talk, and unusually well coordinated for his age. She made it a point never to boast about any of us, but of Michael, my mother would allow. I don't want to say he's gifted, but I know there's something special about him. Bright-eyed, with impish smile, Michael was a scamp and an inexhaustible ball of energy. Though never bossy, he was a natural leader. Every morning before school, the neighborhood kids congregated around our tiny front porch, waiting for Michael to emerge and declare which game they would all play that day. Everything was Michael this and Michael that. In his own little world, he was already famous. Even then, Michael had clear ideas about the Brothers Act and its presentation. If they were shooting promotional photos, the 6-year-old posed everyone, instructing in his peep of a voice, "Okay, Jackie, you stand here. This way. Jermaine, you'll be next to Jackie, but like this." No detail escaped his eye. Spirited and supremely confident as a child, Michael was the only one of us who ever hit Joseph back. Whenever my father raised a hand in anger, everyone else stood still and braced for the blow. Michael raced off. Michael talked back and always had to get in the last lick, even if it meant another beating. So this is where I'm going to say I'm not really believing that Joseph Jackson was violent towards the girls. It's hard for me to believe that he would not hit the mother, but he would hit the daughters. I don't know. So that part right there is questionable. But nonetheless, let me go into the story. She brought home a straight A report card. And there was a note left on the report card that, okay, Toya is fine, her grades and all, but she doesn't really speak up. She doesn't really interact with other children well. And according to her, this is what made Joseph mad. "You will never shame me like this again. Never," he yelled, punctuating his words with hand slaps. "This will teach you to study." His boxer's fist pummeled my face and body, and I cried until my eyes were swollen, nearly shut. "But I do study," I thought. "Why are you beating me?" Of course, I said nothing. Just as abruptly as he'd exploded, Joseph stopped. Yanking me by the arm, he dragged me down the hall to the bathroom, roughly threw me to the hard floor, and walked away. I felt the shock of the cold tile against my hot, wet cheek. Then a heavy book fell on my bleeding leg. "You stay in there and read this." The door slammed shut. I lay on the bathroom floor, moaning in pain and quietly sobbing for hours. As supper time neared, each of the guys came in to wash up, carefully stepping around me, never saying a word, for fear that Joseph would either beat me again, beat him, or beat us all. Our father controlled us with the constant, implicit threat of further violence. It paralyzed us and indirectly made us accomplices. Curled up there that evening, I felt invisible and worthless. After I'd cry myself to sleep, Mother came in and silently cleaned my cuts and bruises before tucking me in next to Reba. I don't know. This may be one of the lies that she said, that she admitted to later on, but I just don't see Joe Jackson being violent towards his girls. And I'm just going to leave it right there. My siblings and I, accustomed to this terror, assumed that Joseph had valid reasons for his outbursts. So I believed I must have done something very bad to provoke him. Just what? I didn't know, because neither he nor my mother ever discussed it or any other random punishments with us. A child learns about the world first through her parents' behavior. When they are out of control, as our father was, or meek and defenseless, as our mother seemed, she can't help but think this is not only how things are, but how they should be. I vowed I would never give Joseph cause to beat me again. To a very limited extent, my plan worked. Though I remained powerless to stop the relentless psychological abuse, Joseph never raised a hand to me again. Because of that, my brothers still call me the spoiled one. But verbal abuse is every bit as painful as a beating. Fact. Perhaps more so, because a beating eventually stops. Cruel, demeaning words repeat themselves in your head long after they are spoken. After mother became a Jehovah's Witness, we no longer celebrated Christmas at home. So my grandparents, feeling sorry for us, took us to Christmas parties and gave us gifts and money. Although this went against my mother's religious beliefs, she permitted it, seeing how happy it made us. Otherwise, except for Joseph, as children, we all followed the Jehovah's Witness teachings and attended meetings at the Kingdom Hall several times a week. There we learned that the Bible was the word of Jehovah, the only true God, and the sole authority. Okay. Mother encouraged but did not force any of us to become witnesses, believing we should decide for ourselves. Several of us, including Michael and I, were later baptized in the faith and remained deeply committed most of our lives. Even those Jacksons who eventually abandoned it were influenced by its moralistic teachings. With 8 of us, it was getting harder to make ends meet, so Mother worked part-time as a cashier at Sears in Roebuck. The whole family was dedicated to developing the brothers' talents, and no one minded doing without little luxuries so that Jackie, Tito, Jermaine, Marlon, and Michael could get an essential piece of equipment. At first, the neighborhood kids teased them for staying inside to practice music every day, but soon those same kids were perched on our front lawn, listening to them sing and play. My father continued to drill the guys with the single-mindedness of a football coach, refining their vocals, choreography, and presentation until they were perfect. And goddamn it, he did it. He might have beat them down emotionally, physically, psychologically, but goddamn, Joe Jackson did it. Say what you want about that bastard, but he got the job done. For inspiration, he played them records by such R&B greats as Otis Redding, Jackie Wilson, The Temptations, Smokey Robinson, and The Miracles, and James Brown, whose moves Michael picked up effortlessly. Around 1965, calling themselves the Jackson 5, my brothers took first place in a talent contest at Roosevelt High, just around the corner from the house. For Joseph, this was the turning point. For the next 3 years, the guys performed up to 5 shows a night, almost every weekend, singing top 40 pop and soul hits like Who's Loving You and Tobacco Road. Most bookings were local, but some took them as far as Phoenix, Kansas City, Washington, D.C., and Philadelphia. Though now semi-professional entertainers, my brothers still had their everyday responsibilities and chores. On the road, they brought along their school books for homework, had to be finished by Sunday night or else. A few days later, they were back, exhausted, but with fantastic stories about where they'd been and the great acts they'd opened for. Sam and Dave, Gladys Knight and the Pips, the Temptations, the Isley Brothers, the OJs, and James Brown. The hardest working man in show business, Michael's biggest influence then was a special favorite for his tornado-like spins, acrobatic deep splits, liquid glides across the stage, and of course, James never performed in or around Chicago without visiting our home. One time, I got to see the guys sing at Chicago's Regal Theater. The heavy velvet curtain opened and wow, there they were, up on a big stage, bathed in colored lights, with hundreds of strangers on their feet, applauding the Jackson 5 and shouting more. You have to remember, in 1967, Jackie, the eldest, was just 16, and Michael, already the star, was only 9. On stage, they stood in basically the same formation they would keep for years. Tito at stage right, hunched over his guitar in the center, the tallest Jackie flanked by Marlon and Michael, and on the left, bassist Jermaine, keyboardist Ronnie Rancifer, and drummer Johnny Jackson, no relation, accompanied the group then and into the 1980s. The real test of the Jackson Five's talent came the following year when they won first place at the legendary Apollo Theater's Wednesday night amateur show. By then, they were fairly well known from their appearances at traditional black theaters such as Detroit's Fox and Philadelphia's Uptown. But for any black artist, the Apollo is the pinnacle, the proving ground that separates the pros from the amateurs. Win amateur night at the Apollo and you're on your way. My brothers did, and they were. Not long after, Joseph quit his job at the steel mill to devote all his time to their career. You might think my father and mother sound like stereotypical stage parents, but they weren't. Later, after we moved to Hollywood and met other young entertainers and their folks, we saw what real stage mothers and stage fathers were like. I found that many stage parents pressure their kids into show business to gratify their own egos, living vicariously through their children's success. Even though Joseph had abandoned his dream of becoming a professional musician, he encouraged my brothers as much for their sake as his own. You have to remember, quitting his job then was a tremendous risk financially. This was his way, probably his only way, to express his love for his sons. The next step my father decided was to make a record. That year, the Jackson Five released their first single, a ballad titled Big Boy, backed with You've Changed, on the independent hometown Steeltown Records. After Big Boy, distributed by the major label Atco, became a local hit, Joseph pursued a contract with the Nationals. His goal was Motown Records, the biggest, most successful black-owned record company in America.